lovely to meet you, Alison. My name's Georgina. I'm a psychologist from Minds Thrive. And I thought it's a really good time for us to meet together with Mental Health Awareness Week approaching. And I think it's an opportunity for us to reflect on the realities of the experiences of being a mother. And like you, I'm a mother of twins. I have 3 very young children. And I kind of wanted to reflect from a lived experience perspective on some of the struggles that we can encounter, but also have a think about some of the tools that are available to help us cope.
I think it's such a good opportunity to chat about this, Georgina, because I feel like it's only since becoming a mum that my mental health has truly been challenged. I thought I'd, experienced it, mental health wobbles before that, but yeah, no, it really has put me to the test. So I think it's a great opportunity to talk about it.
I think it is an incredibly demanding time of life. I mean, it brings with it tremendous blessings. But if I think about my own journey, the fantasy of being a mother and the realities of being a mother are quite different things.
Yes.
So I long to be a mother, and it took quite a long time to get there. So the absolute joy of having these children, and I had all these plans of the things that I was going to do. I was going to join the PTA. I was going to bake with my children. We're going to create these wonderful memories. But the reality is that circumstances changed, and I found myself pretty much working full-time with 3 young children. I have never been to one PTA meeting. I can count on one hand the number of times that I've baked with my children. And I think, well, for me personally, there are many opportunities to feel guilty as a mother.
I think that really resonates with me, Georgina, because I feel like that because we kind of, before we become parents, we see all of this idealized, the visuals and the optics of what parenthood is like you're saying, baking with your kids and joining the PTA. It's this kind of picture perfect view. And then when you're actually in it, it is so different. And it can be really hard to wrestle with those feelings of guilt. And I know that for me personally, I have felt over the years, really deep comparison, especially now that we have social media as well, looking at these mums who are baking and they're running the PTA, never mind just joining it. And they are crafting with their kids and they're going out on big outdoorsy walks and there's no screen time involved. It's all just wholesome family fun.
Yeah.
And it can be so hard not to compare and just feel racked with guilt that my reality isn't the same.
Exactly. And I think there's a whole compare despair. And when we look at social media, we see that idealized view of people's lives, don't we? We don't get to have those real connections. And it's only when you form those friendships and understand the realities underneath the life of the mother who seems to have it all together. Because I don't know about you, Alison, but I've never actually met in reality someone who really has it all together. I certainly don't.
Do you know what? I have actually met a few, but then I just think that they're very good at only sharing the aspects of their life that give that impression.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you scratch the surface and if you actually knew what was going on behind closed doors or the work that it takes to have the perfect show home house and the effort that they're putting in, I sometimes compare myself, but then I remember the work that they're putting in and think, okay, I choose what I have. My house could look perfect, but I'd rather sit down with a cup of tea and watch Hey Duggee with my kids than be letting them watch Hey Duggee while I run around with the Hoover. Like, that's just the choice that I make. And I think I'm okay with that.
Do you know, I make the same choice. But I think my husband would rather I make a different choice because he looks around and he's like, it's chaos. It's always chaos. And it is always chaos. I hardly sleep.
So what choice is he making out of interest? Because my view on that is if there's 2 adults in the family, and one of them is getting wound up by the state of the place and the mess, that adult could absolutely make the choice to be spending their time cleaning and tidying. So does that not happen in your house, Georgina?
That is an interesting question, and he suddenly has many strengths. He's a brilliant cook, actually. He does all the cooking, but he has less enthusiasm for running the vacuum round.
Yes, I feel that.
He has allergies, Alison. So
okay.
No problem in our house.
Fair enough. I mean, you could suggest that he takes a strong antihistamine and get hoovering, but no, fair enough.
The mask. But he didn't look very impressed at that suggestion. But I think these are the realities that we face, aren't we? We're stretched trying to do everything well. And there's something about, do you know what? I've got to make choices here. What are the things that are really important to me? What do I value? So for me, in parenting, I want my children to know that they are loved. I want them to have a safe space to return to. I want them to be able to find their talents and skills and have opportunities to explore those, build connections, like do those important things.
Yeah.
When they reflect on their childhood, I hope they won't go, Mummy kept the house very poorly. I hope they'll reflect on, you know what, we had lots of fun.
Yeah, of course they will. Of course they will. The other thing to bring into that as well, Georgina, is that I've got friends who have immaculate houses and they don't just sit and play with their kids and sit and chill with them, but they grew up watching their mums tidying and cleaning and never sitting down and never resting. And so I feel like I am teaching my kids how to rest. I'm teaching them how to play. I'm teaching them actually the value of just stopping and maybe taking a breather and living a little bit more slowly and not being constantly on the go. I've got three girls. So for me, I think it's even more pertinent that I don't want to be teaching them by example that they have to be constantly on the go. That's really important to me.
Well, you're talking about two important things there, Alison. You're talking about self-care. How do we demonstrate self-care to our children so that they escape, hopefully, this trap of guilt that we can get caught into, that they learn to look after themselves, to be sustainable? Because that is what we're looking for in life. Not burning out, but kind of being able to continue with what we value and modelling. So how do we treat ourselves? How do we respond to food? Do they see a mother who's kind of withholding food for themselves? Is that what they should do when they're an adult? How do we develop healthy ways of relating to ourselves and healthy ways of relating to others? I think that's kind of what we're trying to teach them.
Yeah.
And I think we can often get caught up in this need to get it right. And I can't remember her name. It's gone from my mind. But she's a Perry as well.
Oh, Philippa Perry.
Philippa Perry. So she talks about actually as parents, if our child were the plant, we are the soil that nurtures that child. And so can we provide them with that nurturance? But do you know what that is? That's about rupturing and repairing. It's not about getting it all right.
Absolutely. Yeah? Do you know what? That's one of the biggest things I've learned in parenting is rupture and repair. And I used to really beat myself up when my eldest was little. If I lost my rag and shouted, if she wasn't putting her shoes on and I was just getting really stressed and I ended up shouting, I would beat myself up for the rest of the day. And that since I've learned about rupture and repair, I know that actually from time to time we will all lose it and shout, and it's not ideal. But the important thing is that later on, when my kids come back from school, I'll sit down and I'll say, or even on the walk to school, I might just take a breath and say, Mummy's really sorry. I shouldn't have shouted. I was getting frustrated. I was worried that we weren't going to be getting to school on time. And actually recognizing the importance of that repair moment has just completely changed everything for me.
Yes, exactly. I think knowing your triggers is really important too. So, shoes, a massive trigger for me as well. You wouldn't imagine how complicated it is getting children to put their shoes on before you go to school. And you go, the gates close, don't they? It's pretty brutal if
Yeah.
you're not there on time.
I feel like in the labour wards up and down the land in hospitals, they need to have a little checklist of, by the way, these are the things that are going to cause you issues in the
Yes.
future. Shoes. You have no idea how stressful shoes are going to be. They need to
Yeah.
tell us, give us advance warning of this.
Do you know, I even got a phone call from my husband on one occasion. I was at work and he's like, "Where are the shoes?" I don't know where the shoes are. They were actually in the garden.
Of course they were. Of course they
Where
were.
else did you put them?
Why
Yeah.
didn't he look there?
So actually, sometimes he will intervene for me when he can see like my volcano is bubbling. He will come in and say, "Yeah, come on, we'll do this." And actually, they respond to him really annoyingly. Far more than they do to me. So there's wise words are trying not to speak when you're angry. But the reality is, when you've got to get children out the door,
Yeah, it's going to
it
happen.
is tough. Yeah. But for me, there's something about bringing compassion with you along
Yes.
the journey of parenting. I don't know if you're familiar with some of the work of Paul Gilbert and Kirsten Neff on self-compassion.
I'm not.
And
Tell me more about it.
But you know, I'm a big fan of Kirsten Neff because she also has a child with autism, and she's got a TED Talk where she talks about her experience on a plane where her child, I think he's having a complete meltdown, and you know, she's very much aware of the frustration being held by all the passengers. And there's absolutely nothing that she can do in that moment. And she's getting more and more fretful. And she kind of meets herself with this compassion of herself. This is really hard right now.
Yeah.
This is really difficult. Rather than everybody's looking at you, seeing you can't control and manage your child. This is terrible. Nobody's sleeping. They're going to have this terrible time when they arrive. That's where my mind can go. But actually finding that compassionate voice and an encouraging voice, because I think as mothers or as people as in general, we're more likely to notice the things that we do wrong than the things that we do well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why connection is so important, because having a good circle of people around you that you can be real with, where you know that they will respond in a supportive way. Sometimes the supportive people in our lives challenge us too, and that's good. But they can help us to shift our perspective, and equally we can help do that for them as well.
Absolutely. That compassion thing as well, that's so like that really speaks to me. There's one thing that I keep in my head that ties in with that, which is a tip that I got from Susie Redding, who I think she is a psychotherapist and an author. And she talks about giving yourself a pet name. So in the same way that when we talk to our kids, you know, we might call them sweetheart, or I call mine chicken. I'm like, come on, chicken. Talking to yourself and giving yourself a pet name, because actually it softens that inner voice, and it softens the way that we speak to each other, speak to ourselves. And it makes us far more likely to talk to ourselves with compassion in the same way that we talk to our children in that same way. And so I've started doing it. I've started, rather than berating myself and like, oh, come on, you've got to, you know, meet those deadlines today. And like, oh, you know, you're such an idiot. And oh, I start saying to myself, right, come on, chicken, you've got to, you know, only a few more deadlines to meet today. You're doing really well. And actually, whenever I do it, I feel a bit emotional because I realize that it's the opposite of what I've been doing my entire life. So it's really powerful, I think, talking to yourself with compassion.
I like that, because in using that word, you're bringing in that warmth. So compassionate minds theory talks about the perfect nurturer. So sometimes we might be blessed with someone in our life who has filled that function. Nobody fills it perfectly. Sometimes it might be someone from television. So I often think of the Wizard of Oz and the Good Fairy. She's a sort of representative of that perfect nurturer. And we can ask ourselves the question of what would that perfect nurturer be saying to me right now, when we're in those struggles and we're experiencing that condemnation? What would that person say? But I love your chicken idea, because that kind of short circuits that. You're kind of putting that on your shoulder and you're bringing that into your now, and you're bringing that compassion and that warmth. And I think what we know about compassion is that actually it helps us to keep forging on. But that is not what people think it will do. They think, oh, do you know what? If I get all compassionate with myself, I'm just going to be this slacker and not get anything done. The reverse is true. So I would really encourage, if that's spoken to anybody, to look into those resources.
Yeah, definitely.
And self-compassion.
Brilliant.
But yeah, so we've talked about quite a few different things today, haven't we? So we've mentioned self-care. And self-care is so important that we permission ourselves to look after ourselves. But there is a reality, right? If you say, well, take care of yourself, go to a spa. I can't go to a spa. I've got way too many things going on. I would feel...
Yeah.
It would cause me more stress. I've got to book it. I've got to find the time to book it. I've got to negotiate who's going to look after my children. Do you know how I do self-care, Alison? This is where we're at right now. If I can have a 20-minute nap, that makes the biggest difference to me.
I bet it does, yeah.
I can just shut myself away, and then there's a little bit more energy and enthusiasm for the evening routine.
Yeah.
So the reality...
You're right. Self-care does not have to be an expensive spa day, like taking a whole day out. I had a bit of self-care yesterday. My kids, we'd all had dinner, and my kids were, playing in the living room, and it was getting very noisy. And I took myself out to the garden, and I took my book with me, and I had 10 minutes of sitting in the warmth with a cup of tea and my book, and it was it was so blissful, and it's exactly what I needed. Just 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be some big, expensive spa day just to, perk yourself up.
Yeah, exactly. So it's looking at the reality of the situation that we're in and thinking about what can I do for me.
Yeah.
But also about connecting with supportive others. And there was something else I was going to say, and it's just bounced right out.
Well, we also spoke about we've also spoken about comparison and the dangers of living your life in that state of comparison, and how
So very recently I went to visit my cousin, and my cousin has the most perfectly behaved daughter. She's absolutely delightful. And we were having our dinner, and I looked at my two, and I looked at her, and they were their cutlery skills, they're just not on it. Because at home there's so much going on around the dinner table, so that is not a skill that I have honed. And I immediately went into condemnation, and I nitpicked. Nitpicked is not helpful. They get defensive then and stressed around the eating, and I'm feeling more stressed. And we had to do a bit of rupturing and repairing there. But it's something about recognizing, do you know what? These are the battles I face. So there are things that are really important. My children are not allowed to blaspheme. I have nailed that one. They don't do that.
Well done.
There are certain things that I have achieved, but there are other things that I haven't yet. Yeah. And that's okay. And I don't want to stress them out and create stress around eating because suddenly I'm doing my compare despair thing.
Yeah. And also I imagine what was going on in that situation was that in your head, you were thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want my cousin to judge me and think that I'm failing as a mum because my kids aren't using cutlery
Yes.
to the same standards that their kids are. And really, the reality probably was that your cousin hadn't even noticed and wasn't judging you in that situation.
Until I started moaning.
You probably drew attention to it yourself. And I would also say about that, like stuff cutlery, like, like you say, we've all got our different battles to fight and different priorities. And cutlery, to me personally, is such a minuscule part of life. Like, no one really, think about it. When did you last hear somebody say, "Ah, Janice down the street, she's such a good mum. Her kids' cutlery skills are impeccable." I saw them down at the cafe and they were using their cutlery beautifully. Like,
Yeah.
stuff cutlery. Honestly, it's not important. It's far more important that, like you said, your kids are warm, they're happy, they're loved, they're
Yes.
cared for.
Yeah.
That's the bar. Cutlery doesn't
Yes.
even come into it.
Yes. So we have to manage our inner critic, don't we? And not
We
let it
do.
take over. So kind of becoming aware of our response. So yeah, when we feel judged, nobody was judging me except me. And so I was responding to that.
And then in that moment, if you had spoken to yourself with compassion, and if you had called yourself a little pet name, if you'd said, "Oh, chicken, come on, chill,"
Yes.
they're all good, then it might have just brought you down a little bit and calmed you, and then you could have enjoyed your meal without
Yes.
feeling those anxiety levels rising.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
It's hard in the moment, though. It's all well and good, you and me sitting here analysing it and saying what you could have done, but it's really hard in the moment.
Well, do you know, these are the fantasies about psychologists. So I've had people say, "Oh, it must be so easy being you. You've got this brain filled with all these books that you've read," and they imagine that it's easier to implement. This stuff is really tough to implement, and it does require self-reflection. I think that's what we
Yeah.
get good at as psychologists, reflecting and correcting
Yes.
sometimes.
Yeah. When you can.
Yes. Okay. So I think we've kind of given lots of little tidbits, haven't we, through our own personal trials of mothering, that I hope can be helpful for people.
Yeah, it's been so wonderful to chat to you, Georgina. I feel like this has helped me, this conversation, and I'm able to reflect on the various things that we've touched upon. So it's been so helpful.
Oh, thank you.